I was suddenly told to, it was my turn to get up there. And I'd been a broadcaster, so I knew how to speak, I thought, but it was very different to do that on behalf of my sister in front of 1.5 billion people, or whatever it was. And then very early on, I tripped over a word. And I remember thinking, that was a real wake-up call to me. I thought, no, you've got to get this right. And then I think I probably just read off, rather than looking around and doing what you're meant to do. I just thought, right, I've got to get to this. And then by the end, I was completely wrung out emotionally, and I couldn't breathe. And I can remember the last 30 seconds or so, I was punching it out of the bottom of my stomach through using the muscles in the base of my stomach, because my lungs, I just sort of had enough. And then just collapsing into my seat after that.
He made a promise at a funeral that the entire world watched, not a quiet private commitment made in a lawyer's office or a family sitting room. A promise delivered from the pulpit of Westminster Abbey on September 6, 1997, in front of 2 billion people, the largest television audience ever recorded at that point in human history. A promise directed not at the institution sitting in the front pews, but at the 2 boys walking behind their mother's coffin. William was 15, Harry was 12, and their uncle stood up in the most famous church in England and told the world, and told them, that he and the Spencer family would ensure they would not simply be immersed by duty and tradition, but would experience the joy of life that Diana so wanted for them. He was talking directly to the monarchy sitting right in front of him. He was saying plainly that the institution which had failed his sister would not be permitted to simply absorb her sons without his family's involvement. It was the most public declaration of protective intent a family member has ever delivered over a royal coffin. And in the nearly 30 years since that moment, Charles Spencer has navigated one of the most complicated family relationships in modern British history, caught between 2 brothers who took completely different paths away from the institution their uncle warned them about in that eulogy. Welcome to the Marquee Report. This is the full story of Charles Spencer's relationship with William and Harry, and why it matters more right now than it ever has. Let's go back to that eulogy, because its specific content is essential to understanding everything that has followed in the relationship between Charles Spencer and the royal family. The speech is remembered primarily for its emotional power, and for the applause that began outside the Abbey and rolled in through the doors like a wave, unprecedented at a royal funeral, and clearly audible to everyone sitting inside, including the Queen. But the specific language Spencer used deserves careful examination, because it was not accidental, and it was not gentle. He described Diana as someone with a natural nobility, who needed no royal title to generate her particular brand of magic. He noted that she proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic. This was delivered in a church full of people who had stripped that title from her 11 months earlier. He described the paparazzi as those who hunted her, using the word hunted deliberately and specifically at a moment when the role of photographers in her death was the subject of global scrutiny. He talked about her vulnerability and the way a permanent and largely unwanted light had been shown on her. And then he made his promise about William and Harry. I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you were steering these 2 exceptional young men, so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as you planned. That pledge, your blood family, was a direct territorial statement. Spencer was asserting the Spencer family's claim on those boys' emotional and personal development against the Windsor family's institutional claim on their public lives. He was drawing a line in front of 2 billion witnesses, and the institutions sitting in those front pews heard every word. Here is what happened in the years immediately following that pledge, because the gap between the promise Charles Spencer made and what actually unfolded is the foundation of everything complicated about this relationship. The Spencer family's involvement in William and Harry's upbringing after Diana's death was significantly less than Spencer's eulogy suggested it would be. The boys lived at Kensington Palace and Highgrove. They attended Eton. They moved through the institutional machinery of royal life under the guidance of their father and the palace, the exact structure Spencer had implicitly positioned himself against in that Westminster Abbey speech. Spencer himself was living primarily in South Africa during much of this period, having relocated there. The physical distance was real, and it mattered. Whatever emotional closeness had existed during Diana's lifetime required active maintenance across that distance and across the institutional structures now surrounding the boys, structures that were not always hospitable to Spencer's presence or influence. Prince William has spoken rarely and carefully about his relationship with his mother's family. What is verifiable is that the Spencer family connection remained present but not prominent in the public narrative of William and Harry's development through their teenage years and early adulthood. The close protective involvement promised from the Westminster Abbey pulpit did not manifest in a visible way that matched the scale of that public commitment. Whether that reflects a failure of Spencer's intentions or simply the practical reality of raising royal children within an institution that has its own gravitational pull, the result was the same. The promise was large. The visible fulfillment was modest. Here is where Charles Spencer's relationship with Diana's legacy becomes most specific and most significant. Because Althorp is not just an ancestral home. It is the center of everything Spencer controls that the palace cannot reach. Diana is buried on a small island in the middle of an ornamental lake at Althorp, the Spencer family estate in Northamptonshire. Her brother chose that location with complete deliberateness. He was concerned that a publicly accessible grave would be overwhelmed, that her burial place would become a site managed by the pressures of mass grief rather than the dignity of private memory. The island is private, surrounded by water and trees. There is a small temple nearby. The grounds of Althorp are open to visitors during summer months, and the income generated contributes to the estate's ongoing maintenance. But the island itself, the actual place where Diana rests, is genuinely and permanently private in a way that nothing else connected to her memory is. Spencer controls that entirely. The palace has no jurisdiction over Althorp. No royal decree can determine who has access to Diana's grave, or how her burial place is maintained, or what relationship her sons have with the physical space of their mother's final resting place. Harry visited Althorp during his recent UK trip. The Sunday Times reported that the Sussex family spent time there over the weekend of his July visit. The visit was private. No photographs were released. Spencer's position was that no details would be shared, that privacy, genuinely enforced and genuinely maintained, is something Spencer can provide for Harry in a way the palace fundamentally cannot. Whatever Harry's complicated relationship with the institution is, Althorp represents a space entirely outside that institution's reach. Here is the most delicate and most significant dimension of Charles Spencer's current position. His relationship with Harry, specifically as Harry's post-royal chapter, has generated controversy and division. Spencer has not publicly criticized Harry. He has not publicly defended Harry. He has maintained a position of careful public neutrality that reads differently depending on which side of the Sussex debate you occupy. When Harry was promoting Spare, his memoir that contained significant revelations about the royal family, Spencer did not appear publicly to support or condemn it. When the Oprah interview generated global controversy, Spencer was not among the voices either defending the claims made or pushing back against them. He has stayed out of the public narrative in a way that is itself a choice. What sources close to the Spencer family have suggested is that Charles Spencer's personal view of Harry's decisions over the past 6 years is considerably more complicated than his public silence suggests. The man who pledged in Westminster Abbey to protect Diana's sons from being immersed by duty and tradition has watched one of those sons make a series of decisions that have generated precisely the kind of public controversy and institutional damage that Diana's own tumultuous final years produced. Whether Spencer sees in Harry an echo of his sister, a person with genuine grievances who expressed them in ways that created as many problems as they solved, or whether he sees something fundamentally different from Diana's situation is not publicly known. What is known is that he has chosen not to insert himself into the debate. That restraint from a man who was not restrained in Westminster Abbey in 1997 is itself a statement. The Spencer-William relationship has a specific and documented texture that deserves examination, because it has always been more complicated than the public tends to assume. William carries both bloodlines. He is a Windsor by institution and upbringing and constitutional destiny. He is a Spencer by blood through his mother. And Diana's influence on who William became as a person is something he has spoken about with increasing directness as he has grown older and become more confident in his public voice. William has said publicly that he talks about Granny Diana with his children, that he keeps her present in their home, that her charitable instincts, particularly around homelessness, which she first introduced him to as a child by taking him to shelters, have directly informed his own most sustained public work. That connection to Diana's values is also a connection to what Spencer represents. Spencer is the keeper of Althorp. He is the person most directly connected to Diana as a private individual rather than as a royal figure. And William's increasing confidence in speaking about his mother, in claiming her legacy on his own terms rather than the palace's terms, suggests a man who has found his own relationship with what she left behind. Spencer attended William and Catherine's wedding in 2011. He has appeared at significant royal occasions. The public relationship is cordial and functional. Whether it is warm and close in a way that the eulogy's promise suggested it would be, is a question that neither man has publicly answered directly. Here is where the Spencer-William-Harry dynamic becomes most immediately relevant, because the 30th anniversary of Diana's death is approaching in August 2027. And that anniversary is going to force questions that have been deferred for years. Diana died on August 31st, 1997. The 30th anniversary will arrive in the middle of a period when the Sussex situation is more unresolved than it has been at any point since Harry and Meghan left for California. Harry's legal defeat, the Highgrove meeting, William's unchanged position, the People magazine leak, the Invictus Birmingham fundraising gap. All of it will still be in the public conversation when August 2027 arrives, and Charles Spencer will be asked, is there going to be a joint commemoration? Will William and Harry stand together at Althorp? Will the two brothers who walked behind their mother's coffin in 1997 be able to stand together at her grave in 2027? That question has no confirmed answer. What is confirmed is that Spencer controls the space where such a moment could happen. The island at Althorp is his. He decides who comes. He decides when. He decides whether the occasion becomes a story of reconciliation or a story of continued division. For 30 years, Charles Spencer has kept his promise about one thing consistently. The grave is private. The island is protected. Whatever else has been contested or complicated about Diana's legacy in the public sphere, that specific private space has never become a spectacle. Whether it becomes a site of reconciliation in August 2027 depends on decisions that have not yet been made by brothers who are not currently speaking to each other. Here is where everything stands. Charles Spencer made a promise in Westminster Abbey in 1997 that 2 billion people heard. The promise was to protect Diana's sons from being simply immersed by duty and tradition. In the nearly 30 years since that promise, one of those sons became a future king who appears to have found a way to honor his mother's values within the institution he leads. The other left the institution entirely and has spent 6 years in California, generating controversy that echoes his mother's own tumultuous final chapter in uncomfortable ways. Spencer controls Althorp. He controls the island. He controls the most private space connected to Diana that exists anywhere in the world. And he has maintained a public silence about Harry's choices that is itself one of the most carefully considered positions anyone connected to this story has adopted. The 30th anniversary is coming. The brothers are not speaking. The grave is private, and the man who made that promise in Westminster Abbey is the one who will ultimately decide what happens at Althorpe in August 2027. Whether that moment becomes a footnote or a turning point depends on decisions that nobody has yet made publicly. But the space where it could happen belongs to Charles Spencer, and he has never broken a promise he made at his sister's funeral. This has been the Marquee Report. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. See you on the next one.